The summer heat in Connecticut was unrelenting. Sweat beaded on Jacob Mercer's forehead as he sorted through another cardboard box in his grandmother's garage. At 32, he'd developed a reputation among vintage collectors for his eye for forgotten treasures, particularly analog media. VHS tapes, Betamax, Laserdiscs. Jacob saw value in what others considered obsolete. "Jake, honey, I made some lemonade," his grandmother called from the doorway, her voice carrying the gentle rasp of her 78 years. "Thanks, Grandma. I'll be in soon," Jacob replied, not looking up from the dusty box labeled Christmas Memories in faded marker. His grandmother's garage had become a time capsule since his grandfather's passing 3 years ago. No one had sorted through these boxes, and now, with his grandmother preparing to downsize to an assisted living community, the task fell to Jacob. As he dug through the box, his fingers brushed against something at the bottom, a VHS tape in a plain black case. He pulled it out, examining the yellowed label on its spine, Christmas 1992, written in handwriting he didn't immediately recognize. Jacob would have been just 5 years old that Christmas. "One more for the collection," he murmured, setting it aside in his keep pile. Later that evening, after helping his grandmother with dinner and listening to her stories about the neighborhood's changing landscape, Jacob retreated to the guest bedroom. He placed the VHS tape on the nightstand and stared at it, curiosity gnawing at him. Jacob had brought his portable VCR specifically for moments like this, to preview tapes before deciding their fate. He connected it to the small television in the guest room and slid the tape into the machine. The familiar mechanical whir brought a smile to his face as he settled onto the edge of the bed. The screen flickered to life with static before transitioning to black. Jacob waited, expecting the usual grainy footage of decorated trees and wrapping paper chaos. Instead, the image stabilized on what appeared to be a dimly lit living room he didn't recognize. The camera work was shaky, handheld. A Christmas tree was visible in the corner, but the decorations were sparse. "That's weird," Jacob muttered, leaning forward. "This isn't our house." The video showed a modest living room with dated furniture and wood-paneled walls. Snow was visible through a window, falling heavily. The camera panned jerkily, and male voices whispered just below the threshold of clarity. Someone laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that made the hair on Jacob's arms stand up. The timestamp in the corner read 11:37 p.m., 12/24, 1992. "Where the hell was this?" Jacob whispered, unease growing in his stomach. The camera continued its unsteady survey of the room before settling on a closed door across the space. The door had multiple locks, a deadbolt, a chain, and what appeared to be a sliding bolt near the bottom. For nearly a minute nothing happened, just the door, the soft murmuring off-camera, and the occasional creak of floorboards. Then faintly, a sound emerged that made Jacob's blood run cold. "Hello? Please, is someone there? I'm hungry." It was a child's voice coming from behind the door. The camera didn't move. The whispering voices grew more animated, but remained unintelligible. Someone shushed the others. "Please," the child's voice called again, slightly louder. "I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." Jacob's finger hovered over the stop button, but he couldn't press it. A terrible fascination kept him watching as the camera finally moved, approaching the door slowly. Heavy footsteps creaked across old floorboards. "Hey, don't!" another voice warned from behind the camera, the first clearly audible adult voice. It belonged to a young man, perhaps in his 20s. The camera stopped advancing toward the door. From behind it came a muffled sobbing sound. Jacob hit pause, his heart hammering in his chest. This wasn't a family Christmas video. This was something else entirely. He rewound a few seconds and listened again to the child's voice, trying to determine gender or age, but it was difficult to tell, just young, frightened, and alone. His phone buzzed beside him, making him jump. A notification from Analog Treasures, an online forum for collectors where he was a moderator. Someone had tagged him in a discussion about rare promotional tapes. Jacob glanced between his phone and the frozen image on the television screen. With trembling fingers, he took a photo of the paused frame, the locked door in the unfamiliar house, and opened his laptop. There was a distinctive wallpaper pattern visible in part of the frame, a forest green with gold fleur-de-lis design. The furniture style, the wood paneling, the specific model of table lamp visible in the corner, all these were identifiable elements. He uploaded the image to his private folder on the forum and created a new thread titled, "Need Help Identifying Location. Urgent." Jacob hesitated before adding, "Found disturbing footage from 1992. Child may have been in danger. Need to know if this case was ever resolved." He pressed send and returned his attention to the tape. His finger hovered over the play button, unsure if he wanted to see what came next, but he had to know. With a deep breath, Jacob pressed play. The camera remained focused on the locked door, but now someone moved into frame. Only their back was visible. A man wearing a red flannel shirt, his head just out of shot. He approached the door and spoke. His voice artificially deepened. "Santa doesn't come for bad children," the man said. The crying behind the door intensified. Jacob felt sick. Who recorded this? And why was it in his grandmother's garage? The video continued for another minute with nothing but the sound of crying. Then came a sharp knock from elsewhere in the house. The camera swung wildly and someone cursed. The image cut to static. When the picture returned, the timestamp showed 1:03 a.m., Christmas Day, 1992, over an hour later. The camera now showed the same room from a different angle. The door was still closed, but the locks were undone. No one spoke. The only sound was the heavy breathing of whoever held the camera. After 30 seconds of this unsettling silence, the video cut to black, then static, then nothing. Jacob sat motionless on the edge of the bed, the screen's blue glow the only light in the room. His phone buzzed again, a response to his forum post already. What had he just witnessed? Was it real? A staged prank? Some sick home movie? And most troublingly, how had it ended up in his grandmother's possession? Jacob ejected the tape with shaking hands and examined it more closely. The label, which he'd assumed was familiar handwriting, now seemed deliberately disguised. The tape itself was a common brand from the era, Memorex, available at any electronics store in the 90s. He turned the tape over in his hands. On the bottom edge, barely noticeable, was a small sticker with faded text, "Property of BSL Productions." Jacob didn't recognize the name, but it was the first real clue. He returned to his laptop and added this detail to his forum post. His grandmother had already gone to bed, but tomorrow he would have to ask her about this tape, how it came into their possession. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear to Jacob: what he had just watched wasn't just unsettling, it might be evidence. Jacob barely slept that night. The child's voice echoed in his dreams, always pleading, always locked away. By 6 a.m. he gave up trying to rest and checked his forum post. 23 responses had accumulated overnight. Most were typical internet speculation, but one comment caught his attention. Username Analog Archive 83 had written, "BSL Productions was a small video company in western Massachusetts. Went out of business around 95, did wedding videos, commercials, local TV spots, nothing special. Why?" Jacob responded, "Found a tape with their label. Looks like surveillance footage. Disturbing content. Anyone know who owned BSL? While waiting for replies, Jacob showered and dressed. His grandmother was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with practiced efficiency despite her age. "Morning, Gran," Jacob said, kissing her cheek. "Sit, coffee's ready." Jacob poured himself a cup. "Gran, I found something weird yesterday. A VHS tape labeled Christmas 1992, but it's not our family. Did Grandpa ever work with a company called BSL Productions?" His grandmother paused, spatula in midair. "BSL? No, not that I recall. Why?" "Just curious. The tape was in his Christmas box." She returned to the pancakes. "Your grandfather collected all sorts of things, especially after he retired. Always at garage sales and estate auctions. Probably picked it up somewhere and forgot about it." Jacob nodded, unconvinced but unwilling to worry her with the disturbing details. After breakfast, Jacob returned to his laptop. 5 new responses had appeared, but none contained useful information about BSL Productions. He decided to take a different approach. Using image search, he uploaded screenshots of the room from the video. The wood paneling and distinctive wallpaper were common in the early 90s, but specific enough that someone might recognize them. His phone rang. The caller ID showed his friend Meredith King, a research librarian at the University of Connecticut. "Hey, Mir, thanks for calling back." "No problem. You said it was important." "I found something disturbing. A VHS tape from 1992 that might show a crime. I need help researching a defunct video production company." "This sounds serious, Jake. Have you considered going to the police?" "With what? A 30-year-old tape and a bad feeling? I need more information first." "What's the company?" "BSL Productions, Western Massachusetts, early 90s. Give me a few hours. I'll see what I can find in the newspaper archives." 3 hours later, his phone buzzed with a text from Meredith. "Found something? Coffee at 3? At Willoughby's Coffee, Meredith slid a folder across the table. BSL Productions, owned by 3 men, Brian Landon, Scott Weber, and Larry Tilson. They started the company in 1989, went bankrupt in 1995. Jacob flipped through the photocopied newspaper articles. "Any criminal records?" "That's where it gets interesting." Meredith lowered her voice. "Landon and Weber were clean, at least according to public records. But Tilson was arrested in 1993 for aggravated assault, served 18 months. What about the other 2? Where are they now?" "Landon died in 2010. Car accident. Weber still lives in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, runs a computer repair shop." "Pittsfield," Jacob repeated. "That's about 2 hours from here." "Jake, whatever you're thinking, I need to know what happened to that child, wouldn't you?" The drive to Pittsfield took longer than expected due to summer traffic. By the time Jacob parked outside Weber's Digital Solutions, it was nearly closing time. Through the window, he could see a middle-aged man with thinning hair bent over a disassembled laptop. Jacob entered, setting off an electronic chime. "Help you?" "Scott Weber." "That's me." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We're closing in 15, so make it quick. I'm researching the history of independent video production in New England. I understand you were part of BSL Productions in the early 90s. Weber's expression darkened. "Ancient history. Not much to tell. I'm particularly interested in your Christmas productions, special events, holiday promotions. We did wedding videos and commercials for local businesses." "Nothing special about Christmas." Jacob maintained eye contact. "I found a tape, property of BSL Productions, Christmas Eve 1992. The color drained from Weber's face. "Get out. There's a child on that tape, locked in a room. I need to know." "I said get out." Weber's voice rose sharply. "Now, or I'm calling the police." "Maybe I should call them instead," Jacob countered. "Let them watch the tape." Weber's expression shifted from anger to fear. "You don't understand. It wasn't real." "What wasn't real?" "It was supposed to be a project, independent film, horror anthology. Larry's idea." "The tape I found shows a terrified child," Jacob said, "locked in a room on Christmas Eve. It was staged, all of it." Weber's voice quavered. "We hired actors. The kid was Larry's nephew. So the child was acting." "Of course. Christ, what do you think we were doing?" "Then you won't mind watching it with me," Jacob said, pulling out his phone. "I've got a digital copy right here." Weber recoiled. "I don't need to see that shit again." A customer entered the shop, interrupting them. Weber forced a smile. "Be right with you, sir." Then to Jacob, "My address is 1453 Lakewood Drive. Come by at 9, we'll talk. Just don't bring that tape to anyone else." Jacob waited in his car until Weber closed the shop. Instead of following him, Jacob drove to the local library and researched Larry Tilson's assault case. The details were sparse, but one fact stood out. The victim was a 9-year-old boy. By 8:30 p.m., Jacob was parked outside 1453 Lakewood Drive, a modest ranch-style home on a quiet street. Lights were on inside. At precisely 9, he knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, harder. The door swung open slightly. It hadn't been properly closed. "Mr. Weber," Jacob called. The living room was empty, but showed signs of hasty packing. Drawers pulled open, items scattered. A half-filled suitcase lay on the sofa. A noise came from the back of the house. Jacob moved cautiously through the living room toward a hallway. The bathroom door at the end of the hall was closed. Light shone underneath it. Jacob knocked. "Mr. Weber?" No response. With a deep breath, Jacob opened the door. Scott Weber lay in a bathtub full of reddened water, his wrists slashed, eyes staring vacantly at the ceiling. A note on the sink counter read, "I'm sorry about Michael. It wasn't supposed to be real." Jacob stumbled backward from the bathroom, bile rising in his throat. His trembling hands fumbled for his phone to call 911, but before dialing, he noticed something on Weber's desk in the adjacent bedroom, a manila folder labeled BSL Archives. Pulse racing, Jacob glanced between the bathroom and the folder. The police would arrive soon once he made the call. This might be his only chance. He grabbed the folder and quickly leafed through its contents. Inside were old photographs, business records, and a handwritten list of productions with dates. He shoved everything into his messenger bag, then stepped into the hallway to make the call. 911, what's your emergency? I just found a man who committed suicide, 1453 Lakewood Drive in Pittsfield. 20 minutes later, Jacob sat in a police cruiser, answering questions from Detective Morales, a stern-faced woman with graying hair pulled into a tight bun. "So, you were meeting Mr. Weber to discuss vintage video production?" "Yes," Jacob nodded. "I'm a collector. I found a tape with his company's label and wanted to learn more about it." "And you'd never met him before today?" "Never. I just tracked him down through research." Detective Morales studied him skeptically. "We found a suicide note mentioning someone named Michael. Does that name mean anything to you?" Jacob shook his head. "No, I have no idea who Michael is." After 2 more hours of questioning, the police released Jacob, but asked him not to leave town. He drove to a motel on the outskirts of Pittsfield, exhaustion and shock setting in. In his room, Jacob spread the contents of Weber's folder across the bed. Most documents were mundane: tax forms, equipment invoices, client lists. But one item caught his attention: a small black address book. Flipping through, he found an entry labeled Michael Tilson, Hospital. Jacob's hands went cold. Tilson, the same surname as Larry, the third BSL partner who'd been arrested for assault. Below the name was a phone number with a Western Massachusetts area code. Despite the late hour, Jacob dialed the number. "Bay Ridge Psychiatric Facility. How may I direct your call?" Jacob froze momentarily. I'm calling about a patient. Michael Tilson. Visiting hours are from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Is he still there? A patient, I mean. "Sir, I cannot disclose patient information. If you'd like to schedule a visit—" "Yes," Jacob interrupted. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m., please." After hanging up, Jacob pulled out his laptop and searched for information on Bay Ridge Psychiatric Facility. The institution specialized in long-term care for trauma victims and individuals with severe psychiatric disorders. It had been operating since 1987. Jacob could barely sleep that night. The child's voice from the tape. Could it have been Michael Tilson, Larry's nephew? The next morning, Jacob arrived at Bay Ridge promptly at 9 a.m. The facility was less imposing than he'd imagined, a modern complex of low buildings surrounded by carefully maintained gardens. At the reception desk, he signed in. "I'm here to see Michael Tilson." The receptionist checked her computer. "And your relationship to the patient?" Jacob hesitated. "Family friend. He's in the East Wing, room 219. Dr. Campbell will meet you there." Dr. Campbell turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his 50s. "Mr. Mercer, I understand you're here to see Michael. May I ask how you know him?" "It's complicated. I recently found some old footage that I believe shows Michael as a child. I'm trying to understand what happened." Dr. Campbell's expression tightened. "Michael has been with us for over 30 years. His case is difficult. He rarely receives visitors anymore. Is he Larry Tilson's nephew?" The doctor's eyes narrowed. Larry was his uncle, yes. I'm surprised you know that name. What happened to Michael? Dr. Campbell sighed. I can't discuss specifics due to confidentiality, but I can tell you Michael was brought here in January 1993 after experiencing severe trauma. He hasn't spoken a word since. Jacob felt a chill. January 1993, right after Christmas, 1992. Yes. The doctor studied Jacob carefully. What exactly did you see in this footage? A child locked in a room, crying for help. Dr. Campbell closed his eyes briefly. The authorities investigated at the time. Larry Tilson went to prison, though not for as long as he deserved. And the others? There were other men there? The case was complicated. Evidence issues, plea deals. Dr. Campbell's voice hardened. Now I need to know exactly why you're here, Mr. Mercer. I want to know the truth. What happened to Michael? After a long pause, the doctor gestured toward a door. Perhaps you should meet him. Room 2119 was simple but comfortable. Sitting by the window was a man in his early 40s, thin and pale with vacant eyes. He was methodically arranging small wooden blocks into patterns. Michael, Dr. Campbell said gently, you have a visitor. Michael didn't look up or acknowledge their presence. Jacob approached slowly. Hello, Michael. No response. Michael has severe PTSD and selective mutism, Dr. Campbell explained quietly. He understands everything, but he hasn't spoken since he was brought here. Jacob knelt beside Michael's chair. I found the tape, Michael. The Christmas tape. I know someone hurt you. Michael's hands froze over the blocks. His eyes, still fixed downward, widened slightly. Your uncle went to prison, but Scott Weber just killed himself. I think he was afraid the truth would come out. Michael's right hand trembled slightly. What happened wasn't your fault, Jacob continued softly. It was real, wasn't it? Not a film project. Slowly, Michael raised his head and met Jacob's gaze. His eyes were dark with decades of unspoken horror. He reached for a notepad on the nearby table and wrote in careful, deliberate letters. They filmed it for fun. Those 4 words, they filmed it for fun, haunted Jacob during the 3-hour drive back to Connecticut. Michael had written nothing more, returning to his silent arrangement of wooden blocks, but his eyes had communicated volumes of pain. Dr. Campbell had pulled Jacob aside afterward. I don't know how you found that tape, but it's evidence in a criminal case. It needs to go to the authorities. I thought the case was closed. Tilson served his time. 18 months, Dr. Campbell said bitterly, for what they did to that boy. The system failed Michael. The tape disappeared during the investigation, considered lost or destroyed. Without it, the prosecution's case weakened significantly. Now, as highway signs flashed past, Jacob called Meredith. I need more information on Larry Tilson. Jake, what's happening? You sound terrible. It's worse than we thought. The tape is real. They really hurt that kid. Michael Tilson. He's been institutionalized since 1993. Silence filled the line. Then, Larry Tilson was released in 1995. Last known address was in Springfield, but that was 15 years ago. Jake, what are you planning to do? I don't know yet, but this tape needs to go to the right people. Back at his grandmother's house, Jacob found her napping in her favorite chair. He kissed her forehead gently, then went to the guest room to examine the VHS tape again. Something about it still bothered him. Why was it in his grandfather's possession? He turned the tape over repeatedly in his hands, studying every detail. Then he noticed something he'd missed, a tiny sequence of numbers scratched into the plastic near the bottom. 12/28/92, December 28th, 1992, 4 days after the footage was recorded. Jacob's grandfather had been a postal worker for 40 years before retiring. He'd worked the regional sorting facility that served western Massachusetts. With trembling hands, Jacob called Detective Morales in Pittsfield. This is Jacob Mercer, about Scott Weber's suicide. There's something you need to know. 2 days later, Jacob sat in an interview room at the Connecticut State Police headquarters. The VHS tape was now in evidence, along with his grandfather's postal records from December 1992, which Jacob had found in another box in the garage. Detective Morales entered with a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as Special Agent Carver from the FBI's Violent Crimes Against Children Unit. "Mr. Mercer, we've reviewed the tape," Agent Carver began. "First, I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. Cases like these, they don't have a statute of limitations." "Have you found Larry Tilson?" Jacob asked. "Yes. He's currently living in Vermont under the name Lawrence Taylor. We're bringing him in for questioning." Detective Morales opened a folder. "We've also identified the third voice on the tape, Brian Landon. Although he died in 2010, his estate can still be held liable in civil court for what happened to Michael Tilson." "What about my grandfather? Do you think he knew what was on the tape?" Agent Carver shook his head. "Based on our investigation, it appears the tape was mailed at the Springfield postal facility where your grandfather worked. The package was damaged, and per protocol he would have set it aside. Our theory is that he took the tape home, intending to review it and possibly determine the correct address. But he never watched it," Jacob said quietly. "Likely not. The original packaging, which might have shown the intended recipient, is gone. But your grandfather's actions, keeping the tape rather than discarding it, preserved crucial evidence." Jacob nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. "There's something else," Detective Morales added. "The forum where you posted about the tape, someone using the username StillWatching92 has been tracking your investigation. We believe it may be connected to a dark web group that trades in videos of this nature." Jacob felt sick. "My post led them to the tape?" "Actually," Agent Carver interjected, "your public investigation flushed them out. We've identified several members of the network based on their IP addresses when they viewed your post." 1 week later, Jacob returned to Bay Ridge Psychiatric Facility. Dr. Campbell met him in the lobby. "Larry Tilson has been arrested," Jacob told him. "They found more tapes at his house." Dr. Campbell closed his eyes briefly. "There were others?" "Yes, but they're focusing on Michael's case first. The prosecutor thinks they can get a much longer sentence this time." "Have you told Michael?" "Not yet. I wanted to ask your permission first." Dr. Campbell led Jacob to the garden, where Michael sat on a bench, watching butterflies dance among the flowers. "Michael," Jacob said, sitting beside him, "they arrested your uncle. The tape, it's going to help put him away for a long time." Michael turned to look at Jacob, his expression unreadable. "I wanted you to know that what happened to you matters. It always mattered." Michael picked up his notepad and wrote, "Why did you keep looking?" Jacob considered the question carefully. "Because the truth deserves to be known, even 30 years later." Michael wrote again, "The others who watch these tapes, will they be stopped too? The FBI is working on it. Your case helped expose a whole network." For the first time, Michael's face showed a flicker of something beyond emptiness, a subtle relaxation around his eyes, perhaps the distant ancestor of peace. He wrote one final note. "Thank you for hearing me when no one else would." As Jacob drove home that evening, he thought about how a single misplaced VHS tape had set everything in motion. His grandfather had unknowingly preserved evidence of a horrible crime. A label reading Christmas 1992 had hidden a nightmare, but also, finally, the path to justice. Sometimes the most important truths are found in the places we least expect, like a dusty box in a grandmother's garage, waiting decades to be discovered.
If you want to hear the rest of this story, please leave a comment on this video and subscribe.